Hi, welcome to Northern Thrifters. My name is Melinda, and today I'll be sharing with you my thoughts on my June virtual book club pick. The book I picked was The Wanderers by Meg Howrey, and I'll just start by giving a bit of an overview of what the book is about, just to give you kind of an idea. So basically, 3 astronauts are selected to do a 17-month simulated mission to Mars. And this book centers around those 3 characters plus 4 other characters. So we have the 3 astronauts, Helen, Yoshi, and Sergei. And we also have Helen's daughter Meeps, Sergei's son Dmitri, and Yoshi's wife Madoka. And we also hear from one of the people on the Mars simulated mission observation team, and his name is Luke. So you have 7 characters that play the biggest part in this book. Each chapter is from a different character's perspective. So it kind of flips amongst them throughout the story. It doesn't focus on one character. Like, I would have expected when I started reading this book that it would have focused on the female astronaut Helen, but it doesn't. It flips in between. And I will say this is not my favorite book that I've ever read. It was a struggle for me to even want to finish this, but I pressed on and finished it. What I really, for the first part that I didn't like, is a lot of things were comparing this, saying it's similar to The Martian or Station 11. It is nothing like that. And it's also saying, I've heard that it was like a science fiction type book. Besides the fact that they're on a simulated mission to Mars and that they're astronauts and that kind of thing, it has nothing to do with science fiction, at least from my perspective. This book, it's more about people's psychological states at any given time, and the plot is so slow moving, like it's not a page turner. And it could have gone in a lot of interesting directions to make the plot more interesting, but it never took any of the directions that you kind of foresee possibly happening as you're reading this book. So for me, like a kind of a lack of plot, or at least a lack of an interesting plot, and that it focused on kind of the inner state of all of the characters as opposed to what they're actually physically doing in the real world, that I didn't like. So comparing it to The Martian, no. A lot of exciting stuff happens in The Martian. Not really anything exciting happens in here. There is kind of a little possible plotty twist near the end of it that kind of builds up a little, but you never get fruition. You never find out if that's this plot twist is actually real or not. Like, I won't get into spoilers, but there is a little bit of that, so it's on the reader to decide the truth. Overall, like I say, not a book that I would recommend to anybody, especially people who like science fiction. If you like internal psychological turmoil or kind of the thought processes of people, this would be a good book for you. The one character in here that I really did enjoy is Sergei's son, Dmitri. He's around 16 years old, and it's his side of this story. It's kind of a coming-of-age story. That is really interesting. You could make an entire book on that character. So, you know, if you like coming of age kind of stuff, there's a little bit of that in here. But I will say there's a couple kind of quotes in this book that really made me think or go, oh wow, that's interesting. So I'll start with the one. They were talking about the first people that walked on the moon, and that there was a guy left in the shuttle that was orbiting the moon. So it says, for Helen, that's the one astronaut, the initial flame had been a book, Men on the Moon. But it wasn't Neil or Buzz that had interested her, or even the moon itself. She had been attracted to the mission's most unsung hero, Michael Collins, alone in Columbia, drifting around the moon in exquisite solitary splendor, while Buzz and Neil had gone about the terrestrial work of putting down a plaque, erecting a flag, and gathering rocks. Every 2 hours, Michael Collins had gone out of radio contact for 48 minutes when the moon stood between himself and Earth. And during those minutes, he was the most alone person in the history of people. And that bit in the book really made me stop for a minute. I actually closed the book and was thinking about that. Like, being that guy up in Columbia, like this author is so right. He was the most alone person in the history of people. He was in those 45 minutes entirely self-reliant if something went wrong. Like he would have to rely on himself, his training, and no one else. If something had gone wrong, he had nobody to talk to, just his sort of inner thoughts for the 45 minutes every 2 hours. I just thought that was so interesting to put in here, because this book is really about the psychological state of all of the characters. Like, this is a very important quote, I think. And then another thing that I found interesting, they were talking at this point about kind of extra reasons for doing a Mars mission or going to Mars at all. And they were saying here, many astronauts speak of the overview effect, an acute awareness of the preciousness of our planet, and also a shift towards seeing ourselves as members of a larger celestial community. The hope is that by extending the overview effect to all humanity, a new era of care and consciousness, global goodwill, and desire for peace may begin for all of us. And this connects kind of to something else that they mention about astronauts looking outside of, say, the space station or something like that, and looking down at Earth. And from that high up, you see absolutely no borders, which I thought, boy, it's really interesting to have that sort of overview effect as an astronaut. You really see our squabbles between countries and religions and all of that. It really just seems so much smaller than everything else. So I just thought that overview effect concept was kind of interesting. But overall, not my favorite book that I've ever read. So let me know down in the comments. Did you or have you read The Wanderers by Meg Howrey? What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you like the slow-moving plot and kind of being inside the characters' heads throughout the book instead of actual stuff happening in the real world? Let me know. And I'll just go into what the next book. So for July, I've chosen Happy People Read and Drink Coffee, and it's by Agnes Martin Lugand. This is what the cover looks like. So this is the book for July, and I hope you will read along with me and meet me once again on YouTube at the end of July when I share my thoughts with you. So thank you for joining me today, and be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel before you go. I'll see you next time.